Hello and happy Wednesday. We are going to start my next rendition of my content UX audits that I do live. And so on that note, I'm going to make sure that it is actually streaming where I want it to and just make sure of that. So while I'm doing that, I will remind you, and it looks like it is streaming, so that's good. I will remind you that you can submit content for a future content UX audit using this link at the bottom, this blgsmth.tips/content UX. And it could be your content, or, if there's another brand that you want me to audit, then I would accept that too. All right, I can't actually see the video working, but it says that it's live, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that we are good to go. All right. What else was I going to say before getting started? Just that I scheduled this one a little bit late because I was trying to debate if I wanted to do more of like a topical thing or just go straight to the audit. So for this audit and then 2 weeks from now, I think we're just gonna do some audits and do a couple of those. I've been kind of enjoying them lately, and I think that the people who are watching have been enjoying them too. It's kind of fun and dynamic to just go through some content together. And on that note, if you have any questions or any comments as we go through, please share those, and I will see them regardless of what platform you are using to watch this. Cool. So let's go ahead and talk about our subject for today. So I decided that I wanted to do the Jetpack blog for a couple of reasons. One is I'm a previous contributor, and I always thought that they did a really nice job of putting topics together and, finding great contributors and things like that. And then for anybody who is maybe not super familiar with Jetpack and also like the larger brand of Automatic, so those in the WordPress world are fairly familiar with these different relationships, but essentially Automatic is the parent company of the WordPress software, which has kind of two different it kind of breaks off into two different segments. There's WordPress.com, which is like the managed version of WordPress, the version 2 that Automatic specifically runs. It is kind of like a different version than WordPress.org, which is the version of WordPress that you would use if you worked with other web hosts or if you self-hosted. And so WordPress.com is a little bit more locked down. You can't use as many plugins and themes with it because it's locked down. So WordPress.com is something that's really great for maybe more of like a beginner WordPress user or somebody who doesn't need like every single feature that WordPress.org can offer, whereas WordPress.org is more of the solution for people who want to play around with it and need like a flexible structure and need more options. And so anyway, Automatic is also the parent company to Jetpack, which is a plugin, something you can use to extend the functionality of WordPress. And then they have some other integrations, plugins, and things like that fall under this Automatic brand. So figured I would just explain that for anybody who's not familiar and kind of like how all these things work together. Okay, so Jetpack does really several different things. It's one of those plugins that I think the goal for Automatic when they made it was to make it very functional and add a lot of functionality, especially for those WordPress.com users who maybe, aren't going to be able to access the full plugin repository. So Jetpack serves many functions for WordPress.com users, but you can also use it on, the install it yourself WordPress.org. All right, so I picked this article. It's one of the newer ones, but it kind of serves a couple purposes in terms of things that I wanted to talk about. And so I guess let's go ahead and start by just kind of appreciating the aesthetic. I think that that's something that Automatic does really well across all of its different products. And WordPress, interestingly, is a CMS that was originally created so that people could create blog content. And so, it makes sense that we are viewing this particular blog on a WordPress CMS, and it's also, giving us some indication as to some of those kind of like quintessential WordPress features. Things like having this browse by topic is very like retro WordPress. That's when I like built my first WordPress site, which was actually for student video productions at the University of Iowa. I remember it very well. I'm pretty sure that we actually use this function in the sidebar itself. And so it's kind of bringing me back there, but it's also making me question, like, is that still an essential feature of WordPress? And really specifically for Jetpack here, is this sidebar, and specifically being able to browse by topic and being able to see, you know, how many topics they've covered in that subtopic, and being able to click on these different categories, is that a relic from the past, or is it still something that is important and useful moving forward? And I think that in this case is a question that probably only Jetpack can answer. Do people actually click on these things in browse by topic, or as I say during most of my content audits, is this sidebar content actually like distracting and getting in the way of the reader experience? So that's a question for Jetpack. What's notable to me is that as you start scrolling, the sidebar goes away. The one issue from like a content UX audit standpoint is that it still takes up the space, right? And you do still have this ad here, which I think is contextual and it makes sense. And I don't think that necessarily takes away from the user experience. But what I'm trying to say is that the content is not able to take up the full space. So it's like the distraction of the sidebar is removed as you scroll, which I think is great. But does it solve the issue of, you know, being able to like use the full space to read the content? Not necessarily. But again, I always bring up the sidebar because everybody handles it a different way. And I'm just asking the questions as to if it's truly necessary or if you could cover these things somewhere else. What I do really like about the sidebar is the option or the call to action here to sign up for email updates. I think that, you know, showing how many people are already signed up is really great social proof. That's compelling to me. What would maybe be more compelling to me, and again, I'm sure Jetpack has tested this, but they talk about, you know, following the blog, and so, you know, thus being able to get new blog posts, receiving news and updates from Jetpack. What they don't mention that's kind of interesting is any sort of like promos, you know, like, you know, follow this newsletter in order to get updates about promotional pricing or something like that. And I'm pretty sure that Jetpack does this because there are various like WordPress affiliate programs that come again from that parent Automatic company. And I'm pretty sure that Jetpack has one. I didn't check that before coming on this live, but I'm pretty sure that they have an affiliate program, and I'm pretty sure that as part of that affiliate program, they run deals so that people can go through affiliates to get, you know, promotional pricing. And I'm sure that Jetpack also offers promotional pricing. So I'm kind of waxing poetic here, but what I'm trying to say is I think that would make this even more compelling. So those are my thoughts on the sidebar. Let's get to the rest of the content. The main thing that I wanted to make sure to say during this audit is mostly about the imagery. I think that that's where this content has the opportunity to be improved. And so one thing that I've noticed on this blog post, and without looking at the other posts on Jetpack's blog, but I'm assuming that the same thing could be said about them, is that it uses a lot of stock photos. So, you know, the featured image is a stock photo of a woman. She's on a computer. So I guess we could say that sort of relates to social media in that you need to use a computer to create it, right? And she looks excited, which I guess we could associate with her. The idea, I think, is that we're trying to associate her, you know, finding success with trying these different contests and giveaway ideas successfully. So then as we go through the post, we see some other examples of stock imagery. You know, here's one. It's a post. I'm trying to see if it had, like, what the text says. It's just kind of a basic caption. So, you know, and that kind of makes sense because it's a photo caption contest. Although I don't think that that's necessarily what we're looking at. We're just looking at a post with a caption. It's a stock photo, right? Okay. So then we go through. Now we have this one, a poll or quiz contest. Not sure what this stock photo has to do with that. Okay, we keep going. And then this one is an influencer collaboration giveaway. So we have maybe what the giveaway could be, I suppose. And right now we're just being critical of like why these stock photos were picked, and then I'm gonna bring it back to some useful guidance here, so just bear with me. I guess you could say that this like maybe kind of has to do with the subheading here, but ultimately it's not really like hitting all the spots. Like, where does the influencer come into this? Where is the social media aspect? It doesn't fully come back to the idea like maybe one of the previous ones did. Okay, and then we have this one, a flash sale alert, and this person seems to be holding up like a makeup palette. Interestingly, it's like the second makeup palette imagery. I won't go all the way up in this article. And I think, the correlation here with the stock photos is like makeup, beauty, influencers, social media. So, okay, we can go with that for now. And I think that's it. So what I wanted to say about all of that, I'm going to go back to the top of the article for now. What I wanted to say about all of that is stock photos, generally speaking, you want to avoid them. And it's really because stock photos are just not distinctive of your brand. They're not distinctive of the content you're trying to create. I think we just shared several examples here that prove that point. This is interesting timing because I'm working on a LinkedIn Learning course, and the chapter that I just finished was about incorporating or using images on the web to complement your copy, things like that. And one of the examples is of why not to use why not to use stock photos is there's this picture of this girl with her laptop, and this image, I've seen it on like every SaaS website like in the world, whether it's their hero image. I have seen an example of the same stock photo in a brand's like hero image on their homepage, but also I've seen it on many blog posts as the featured image. I should have just grabbed that image, but if I popped it on the screen, like I promise all of you would have seen it before. And so the problem is that if you see it again, right, the next time you see it, you're like, oh, that's kind of old news. And also like, it's just kind of uninspired, right? Because so many other brands have used it to the point where it is not distinctive of any of those brands. And so what I will say about Jetpack is I think that they're consistent like with their aesthetic. Again, I think that Automatic as a parent company and all their child brands have like a really nice aesthetic that again like focuses on the content. Like that's kind of like the baseline foundation of what we're looking at here. And I think that the stock photos, they all kind of like fit a similar aesthetic, kind of like Kim Kardashian on Instagram, uses the same types of filters so that everything on her Instagram grid kind of feels like it's part of a series, right? So I think that like we could say that about this particular article and the stock images that are used, and we could probably say that about just about any of their articles, right? But it still doesn't solve the issue of the fact that these stock photos are simply just not distinctive, and as we've already gone through and shown, they're really not representative of the subheadings that they are used under. And so what would be better is the question, right? And so going through here, it's a listicle, right? And it's somewhat formulaic in that, we have subheadings and there's certain structure. We have like body content, and it kind of, is the same length-ish for each one so that there's consistency. And then a bunch of them also have these lists. Okay, and I do want to talk about that too because I have some thoughts there. But just to say that like there's kind of a formula, and you want to see some consistency with that throughout, but you also want to create variation. And so what I'm getting at when it comes to things like images is one potentially good formula for this article would be to add examples. Okay, so instead of stock photos, and I guess if we could just start with this hero image, I think the hero image should be representative of the content that comes after, because it might be what compels somebody to click through from social, or if it's shared in Slack, or whatever, wherever it's shared, kind of this like the sample preview image, and the text would show up. And so that's kind of a separate issue, and I'm just noting that for now. But in terms of like the rest of this article and the formula that we're trying to create here, I think examples would be great. And I think that they would be very compelling, and I think they would be very engaging for this type of article to go through and find and maybe embed from Instagram, for example, different samples of what this looks like. And then the rest of the text, it should define it. It should share best practices, but it could also be focused on just talking through that example and why it works. And if we're privy to the information, how successful that it actually was, and, you know, whatever the goal of using that particular contest was. I think it's also a really great opportunity when you find those examples, or if you reach out, you know, to some influencers and say, what are your best tips on doing a hashtag challenge? And then you include their quote, you know, you make maybe like a nice image that is compelling for the reader, but is also like something that they might be interested in sharing because you've taken the time to personalize that. That's something that also, besides just being useful for the reader, which I think is the reason we should do anything, it's also something that I think would be interesting to Google, because Google looks for content ultimately that is authoritative, that you can trust because of the expertise, but really ultimately is like unique. You know, we have so much content that already exists that Google's already indexing, and so in order to like appeal to them and try to get one of these top search rankings, then you have to do something new and something different. And I think that may be what this particular article is missing, is that little piece of uniqueness. The information itself, it's all great. The problem is that it's just kind of information. What it's missing is like how I can use, or like how I know I could use this information to find success. And what it's ultimately missing, I think, is examples or some expert opinions. And we do have an author here. If you go to the bottom, sorry for the Blair Witch Project scrolling, and the author, he's a marketing lead. So I think it's fair to say, like, he's an expert in, or I think Google would at least perceive him to be an expert on this topic, or have enough expertise that, like, that part of it is covered, right? But again, what's missing is maybe the uniqueness. So I think I've you know, covered that enough. I wanted to cover a couple other things. One was talking about like variation within the elements. So like the formula, here's how to, you know, this is probably the keyword. Here's how to do that, or maybe, you know, this is the keyword or something like that. Here's how. I think this post would benefit from having variations within the formula. So maybe having different ways to say this line. Again, just so that it's engaging, because people love variation. In terms of writing, if we were writing for humans, then we want to appeal to them so that they can't just anticipate what we're going to write next. So that's one thought. Another thought is, maybe this is just me, it bugs me that these aren't like actual list items with like indentation, and then they have the same spacing as the rest of the body copy. I don't hate it. It's just something that I'm pointing out that could make it easier to kind of like skim and parse through this information, because it would make it clear visually that it's a list, right? It's not body copy. What else did I want to say? So we have a couple different calls to action about Jetpack Social specifically, which I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if this is like a separate plugin for Jetpack or just a separate like feature set for Jetpack. At any rate, they're treating it as kind of a separate product here, separate thing to talk about. So we have the sidebar mentioned that I already mentioned. We have this same, and what's interesting to me is it's all the same copy on this like in body version of it, body text version of it, and then they have it again at the very end. And again, same text everywhere. That's interesting to me. I wonder if, you know, I'm assuming that's been tested and that works, and it's kind of just like getting that same marketing message in front of people a couple times. There's something to that, instead of like introducing new versions of that. That's interesting to me. What I also noticed is that the whole end of this article, like a quite meaty section, is literally about Jetpack and like why you should use it, Jetpack selling itself. For the record, I think that this is something that as a brand, if you put a lot of time and effort, I mean, this is a very meaty article. If you put a lot of time and effort into creating an article like this, I think that like it's your right to be able to share about your brand in terms of how it's like relevant to this article and why you might consider like, you know, buying their solution. But I am noting it because it's different than what I usually see, which is either, you know, usually like a quick mention that's kind of weaved into the body text, or maybe, you know, like a greater mention at the end where you're kind of like pulling it all together and sharing how your brand fits in. But I'm just noting that this is very interesting. And there is another call to action here. Learn more about Jetpack Social here. I will say, and kind of per the Blogsmith style guide, I don't love hyperlinking here. I think it would have worked without that. But yeah, generally speaking, we try to avoid that. And speaking of the Blogsmith style guide, there's something else that I wanted to say, and I think it was about acronyms. So like, for example, the first time that this acronym, user-generated content, is mentioned, it is defined, or the acronym is mentioned in the same line and space as the phrase. And I just wanted to share that's, you know, very consistent with the Blogsmith style guide. And so if you go, and this is just on the blogsmith.com/content-style-guide. Let me do this. We kind of have the same way of doing things when using a standard abbreviation. Make sure to define it the first time you use it. You don't need to define it more than once in an article after you do that. And then the other thing that I was going to say, make sure that you've defined the full phrase alongside the abbreviation before referring to the abbreviation alone. Yes, even for abbreviations that the target audience should know, with few client exceptions in our case. So I was just pointing that out because I think that they did the right thing. And it's an article about social media. So probably the people who are reading this, they know what UGC is when you spell it out. But I think that it is a nice thing to do for your reader. It doesn't take that much time and it only adds value. So I did want to make sure to call attention to that. Was there anything else that was worth mentioning here? We talked about the sidebar, you know, some devil's advocate thoughts on whether it should be included or not. Another thing that I guess I wanted to call attention to was, I think Jetpack does this for a lot of articles, but adding like a number to kind of give a sense of depth of what's going to be covered here. And again, like it's a very meaty article. And so you kind of know going into it that there is going to be a lot to read, but there's going to be a lot of ideas too. And then I think the last thing that I wanted to talk about was they have this FAQ section at the end. So sorry, I'm going to scroll quickly again to get there. This is something that I'm definitely noticing a lot with content in 2024, both in terms of the things that we work with clients on, but also like what I'm seeing out on the web. And it's definitely an SEO play. There's no way around that. I think that Jetpack does an exceptionally nice job of doing this, because I think most of what I'm seeing with these sections is like quick question, quick answer. But as you can see here, you know, they're kind of treating this, you know, as like a mini blog in and of itself. There's formatting, there's lists, you know, there's an attempt to present this information concisely and succinctly, which I think is like the point of having this section at all, is to just make it really user-friendly for the reader. So I really liked how they did that. I think that they understood the assignment, right? They were trying to not just do the SEO play, but also to like ultimately provide value, and doing that through like great formatting and conciseness and how they approached it. All right, I'm just looking through to see if I had any other notes for myself on this. No, I think that's pretty much it. We've covered a lot here. Again, this is one where it's like, it's hard to find things to be critical of, but I'm just trying to see like where a blog like this could add some additional value. And really, like, I think at the end of the day for the business, it's like creating more engagement, right? Because just the topic itself lends itself really well to being displayed visually. And like this was another thing that I put in my notes. Having like a visual for a meme creation challenge, it seems like you really should do that for an article like this, right? Like you don't necessarily have to have an example for each one of these, but if you want to keep that reader on the page longer, and then also like keep talking about Jetpack and, you know, why that's a good solution, then I think that would have done the trick a little bit better. So those are my 2 cents for today. I do not see any comments, so I will go back to my starting scene thing here, which has this URL that you can use if you want me to audit your content or another brand that you admire and, you know, you want another set of eyes on it. So it's blogsmith.tips, no vowels in that first part, /content UX. It just asks a couple of very quick questions. And that's what we will do for the next live stream 2 weeks from now. It will be another content UX audit. And I will look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much for joining me today.